Cathy Laws has been a coach for us for 13 years, and she is retired from. Come on up, front table. No, no, no. Thank you. She's been retired from IBM, where she worked for 35 years in accessibility, giving people more accessibility to all the computer stuff that they were doing, software that they were doing. And so, Cathy, come on up and share.
Okay. Good morning. I actually like smaller groups. But have any of you ever been to this talk before on personal branding that I do? So I can share all my stories and you haven't heard them yet. Okay, very good. So before we actually go through the handout y'all have, I'm going to just share a little bit about me and my story, because we're going to use it as examples as we go along. But I also want to invite you, as we go through what I call brainstorming exercises, for you to share some of your examples as well in your job search, in your history, job history, so that it'll be more interactive, okay? So yeah, I started working at IBM fresh out of college at 21 years old. And I initially worked in data communications, but then for 25 of my 35 years, I discovered this organization that was working on technologies and standards to help people with disabilities use our software as well as our own employees. But also I worked with the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, and I was on their committees for much of my time and writing papers and such on how to enable software to be more accessible, to work with screen readers. But I also developed fun programs. I developed a program called Speech Viewer as a speech therapy tool for a while, and it was used for over 20 years by speech therapists in the schools and in the VA offices. So it was a rather fun, niche kind of job, which makes it easier to do things like write a resume that stands out from the crowd. Like, how many people can say that they've done that, right? So there were only 10 of us in the company at any one time that were software engineers. We had marketing people and technical writers and other, testers and such as well. But there were only 10 software engineers at any given time, and still are. In fact, the son of one of my employees is running the little organization over there today. So it's kind of fun. But I also wasn't sure I really wanted to be a software engineer. I really wanted to be a math teacher. So I decided, after I was somehow talked into getting a computer science degree by my counselor at TCU, that I wanted to go back and get my master's in education. And I actually picked technology in education, which is now known as STEM. And so for a little while after I worked at IBM, I actually worked for a little franchise called Bricks for Kids. Anybody ever hear of Bricks for Kids? So we kind of worked with kids in an after-school program using Legos to teach them math and science concepts. So I had a lot of fun with that. I substituted in the schools as well. But I also, because I go to church here at Hill Country, I volunteered in the schools reading with the kiddos for the last 14 years. So that's still what I do today. I'm on the leadership team for Round Rock ISD, and we read in 15 schools. We've read it in as many as 28, depending on the program they want us to do that year. This year we're reading with little kinder kids, trying to get them to learn their letter names and phonemes and sound out little CVC words, they call them, consonant, vowel, consonant. So if anybody's interested in volunteering when they're on this little break, trying to find a job, I have lots of ideas for you, because we have about 30 different ministries we partner with here at Hill Country and Community Impact. So that's kind of my story. I'll share a few more as we go along. But first I want to play a little game with you, okay? So I'm going to say a phrase, and I want you to just shout out what it makes you think of, okay? So what if I say it's the real thing? Coca-Cola. Okay. Don't leave home without it. American Express. It keeps going and going and going. Energizer Bunny. Okay. How about Snap, Crackle, Pop? Rice Krispies. How about Just Do It? Nike. Choosy Mothers Choose? Jif. Finger Licking Good? KFC. How about The Happiest Place on Earth? No. Disney. But that would be fun, too. Like a Good Neighbor, who is there? State Farm. There are some things money can't buy, but for everything else, there's. What? Close. It's MasterCard. I know. So some of them don't quite have us hooked in yet, do they? But these are all kind of slogans, if you will, but they all try to state some kind of characteristic or whatever to get you to buy their product or be a part of the organization or something, including, how about In God We Trust? Whose money? The US dollar, yeah. So whether we agree with their slogan or not, it still is something that they wanted to say, the marketing people chose to say about the product that would hopefully everyone would remember and actually go out and buy something. So we're going to come up with a personal brand statement that's a little longer. I'm going to make you write a whole sentence, not just a little phrase, that you can include as like the summary for your resume, your LinkedIn profile. It's something you always say in an interview, like a little catchphrase in your interview, as well as what we call an elevator pitch. Anybody know what an elevator pitch is? Just like, yeah, one, two, three sentences kind of thing that they say elevator because that's about as long as the time that you would have to talk to somebody maybe. But it's something you might say to somebody, and it's the middle of your elevator pitch, this personal brand statement. So we're going to do that, we're going to kind of go through these exercises, but I want to first just tell, actually, if you look on the first page, there's a little equation. You see that? That says, it's got a person and some other pictures. So the first part of this phrase, you have a question? Mm-hmm.
Did you play more on your personal branding statement? Is that what got you around IBM and promoted and noticed?
No.
Or was it what you brought to the table or what you were known for?
No.
I'm kind of wondering, I mean, personal brand.
Yes.
If that's the group, I mean, how many of you actually buy Jif peanut butter? We all know that's what
Mm-hmm.
brand is.
Right.
But how many of us actually use it and did that really
Right.
drive your decision to
No. And
purchase the product?
right. So let me just talk a little bit to that and why they asked me to do this talk, right? So you heard I worked at IBM for 35 years. Well, it used to be that IBM offered a pension. And when I went to work in the 70s, they offered me a pension. They almost took it away in the 90s, but they did not. So that kept me at IBM all 35 years. I only needed to be there 30, to be honest, and I didn't have to really prove myself to move around in IBM. First, I didn't move very often. Once I snuck over to software group from research, that was not safe. So I went right back. And my manager, fortunately, was still there and wanted me back. But that was not true. Starting in 1988, IBM started doing layoffs. And then in the 90s, they took away the pension. And in fact, on my 30th anniversary at IBM is when the official pension ended. They no longer even, offered it all. Everybody was in more of a profit sharing kind of thing where they put extra money in your 401k. So back in the day, I didn't have to write. I did write a resume every year, an internal one, but I actually was not on LinkedIn. No need to be on LinkedIn. We usually just hired within. We rarely were even allowed to go look, if we were a manager, go look outside of IBM to hire into IBM. That's not true anymore. In fact, even when I was still there back in the early 2000s, I would often hire people, but the way that I got them into IBM was first as a contractor, usually as a tester or a technical writer, something we didn't usually still groom within IBM. But software engineers almost always came from within IBM. And then occasionally I hired people from the open source because I needed those people. They had skills that we didn't necessarily have in IBM. So we did that. But so now you have to distinguish yourself from your competition a lot more than I ever had to do within IBM. Does that make sense? And so to do that, you have to make your resume stand out from the crowd. So, and we're going to talk a lot about this. How do you look more unique than any other software engineer, right? Or any other project manager or tester or whatever you are, or you work in healthcare. How do you stand out from the crowd and get a job when most of the time they're not hiring, or when they do, it's a real small window that you sneak into. So you got to figure those things out, right? And so we're going to go through and, yes. Right, and we're going to talk about that. There's different sources you're going to pull keywords from. You're going to pull them from job descriptions, but you're also going to pull them from assessments that you all might have done, like a personality assessment, maybe you did in a career direction class that we offer. Or you're going to look at things you didn't used to look at, like, you know, what are your hobbies? Like when I hired into the Special Needs and Accessibility Center organization, I was looking for people that had more than one degree usually. Like maybe they had psychology and software engineering, because then I knew they could do user interface design easier than somebody that never had done anything like that, right? Or I would look for people that had compassion by looking at their hobbies. Like either they knew somebody that had a disability, or they worked volunteering somewhere with people that had special needs, or even people at all. Were they people kind of people, right? Do they like people? Did they work well in a team? You know, things like that. So you're looking for things that will be the right, because you want to do a good hire, because I was a manager the last 8 years of my career. Before that, I was a user interface designer mostly, and a technical writer, and I rarely sat and wrote code behind a closed door. I was with people all the time. So, but lots of people on my team were not. They were the software engineers that hid behind the door and never came out. We need those too, right? But so that's some of that. So we have an author, a couple of authors, but on our website we have resources that we reference. One of them was Susan Whitcomb, the author of Christian Career Journey, and she says branding is important because it brings new opportunities faster. It makes others aware of your expertise and what they remember about you. It also guides your career decisions. Like if you have a personal brand statement, it helps you figure out, do I even want to apply for this job? Is this really matching my personal brand of the things that I have to offer as a benefit to an employer? It's what people remember most about you, just like those little catchphrases that we went through. Does that help? Make sense? Okay. So let's look at this little equation. So we're going to put together an intro phrase. You might just say a simple standard one like, you know, as a project manager, yada, 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 whatever it is. Or you might start it off and say something like, I've always put an emphasis on whatever it is you put an emphasis on, you know, working with this group of technologies or peoples or whatever. So we'll come up with that, but that's not the important thing. The important things are top 3 selling assets. We're going to do a little brainstorming session that helps to identify things like, what are the tools that you know? What are your skills? What's your expertise? What are your passions? You're going to kind of come up with those as we ask certain questions. And then the other important thing is that we're going to have you try to quantify or qualify your benefit to an employer. Like in terms of, it may be dollars, in terms of percentage, productivity, or time. We're going to use things that show to what degree that you really have those kinds of benefits to offer, okay? We'll talk about ways to do that. And then your unique story, like mine is accessibility added into software engineering, right? So we're going to start walking through some of these exercises. If you look at the first page, 2A, your personal brand brainstorming. So some of these questions are dealing with things I've already been saying, like what makes you stand out from a crowd? How do others see you as unique? And I already talked about things like having more than one degree or different disciplines or job experiences in your company, whether you're, like in software engineering, it naturally has more than one thing you do, okay? But not everybody does everything, right? So you pull things out. Well, I think there's specialties in other areas too, like in healthcare, like if you're a nurse, you know, you may specialize in neonatal intensive care or something, you know? So everybody has some specialties you can pull out. But what are some other things that can help you stand out as unique? Any ideas? Okay, so if there's questions called personal brand brainstorming, section 2A on the very second page, I guess, not the header page, okay? Yeah, we'll get to the chart of words in a minute. So things like some other things, maybe you've published some things, like published articles on the internet or at a conference, you've been a conference speaker, or maybe you're a YouTuber and you've published a whole bunch of videos on YouTube. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to do it these days, right? You're not limited to the more formal, like at IBM, another thing we do is patents. Even I have 4 patents, and I'm not what you would call an inventor, you know, but I had people that worked for me that had over 50 patents to their name within IBM. And so that was something unique too. Like I knew, oh, they're very innovative if they have those. Mm-hmm. Okay. It can be any, well, it could, I mean, they were national. They're published. You can look my name up and find that I have these patents, right? But there's also, like, have any of you ever heard of Joy Mangano from QVC? She's a mom. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she had some challenges at home she wanted to do something about, become more productive. The very first patent she filed was the Miracle Mop. She had some special way to mop that was more productive and efficient than you could buy in the store at the time. She had like 100 of those patents that she filed. And you remember Bed Bath & Beyond when the store was open? All of them were sold there at Bed Bath & Beyond. So people can become prolific in their in patents or social media these days, just being an everyday person that doesn't really have a special job that they're paid to go do that. They can, if they're creative enough to figure that out. Like, people on social media are influencers, all kinds of influencers that publish things and make a difference in some fashion, right? Like, have you ever heard of the movie Julia and Julia? Julie and Julia? So it was this young woman who fell in love with French cooking, so she decided to cook her way through the Julia Child's cookbook. They made a movie about her too, where it shows her becoming known as a French cuisine expert simply by blogging about her experiences in doing this French cooking, right? There's all kinds of things if you can come up with it. I mean, even my 16-year-old grandson has a YouTube channel. And he publishes these little stop-motion animations using Legos and all kinds of interesting little toys he has. And he's becoming known in his little world, right? So people can figure it out, right? And you can include these kind of things in your resume, believe it or not, if they're unique enough. Like I had a lot of college students I hired, and they would do the same kind of thing. They would have a project they were working on with other colleagues at college, other students, and they would end up going to conferences to present their project and writing about them and stuff like that. And those were all ways that I go, oh yeah, they could really do this job, you know, because I see that project they worked on, right? So any other ideas y'all can think of? Yeah.
I'm wondering,
Right,
You've already been tossed out because you don't meet the
right.
requirements they're looking for. So is everything we're talking about icing on the cake after you've established yourself as,
It's,
yes, I'm confident I meet these requirements?
I mean, you have to be competent to meet them, but to make sure your resume even gets a look at, you've got to add that icing, as you call it. It's your uniqueness that makes your resume stand out from the crowd. Something that that catches their eye. They don't even know if they're looking. They may not even know that they were looking for that, but they see it and they go, "This is somebody I want to talk to," right? And see what they've done and other things that I've told you a little bit about from the equation, like just using quantitative measurements of your current competencies and success, make your resume stand out from the crowd. Like if you just said, "Oh, I was a database developer," right? That's not going to make you stand out. But what kind of databases did you develop? Or, were they used by Fortune 500 companies? Were they used by who? Who used them? How many customers did you have for your products? Like even though I worked on relatively little technologies for IBM, the uniqueness of the technology I worked on made my resume stand out. Like who does speech therapy tools? Working at IBM, even if we only sold 1,000 of them, which is nothing at IBM. Like they don't even care about our product, right? But the fact that I did this unique technology still made my resume stand out. So, but it's a good question. Yes? Okay. Yeah, so we're going to talk about all that. Your personal brand statement is going to be in that top section because it's going to be a summary of your whole resume. Okay? And then we're going to develop these personal branding exercises help you develop CAR statements, which is our second class. You're going to work on some of those. But CAR statements stands for I'm really jumping around, but you guys are asking good questions. C stands for challenges, A stands for actions, and R stands for responses. So the challenges help you think of what were some really creative, good kind of successes and achievements I can put in my resume that will get people's attention, right? You may not even state what the challenge was because you're going to write them in the reverse order. You're going to start with the results of what you achieved addressing that particular challenge, and you're going to use strong action verbs to do that, okay? And then you're going to say how you did it by doing this action. We're going to get to that in a minute, but that's kind of addressing where the personal brand statement is really a summary of your resume, or it's something that you always say in an interview. It's the middle of your elevator pitch, or it's the summary for your LinkedIn profile. It's all those things. It's a summary statement, but it's using the most catchy keywords from your resume to state it, okay? Okay, let me see. In these questions, I've covered a whole lot of different things that I normally say, but even the fact that I have my degree in computing technology and education makes my resume unique in another way. First, I can write my resume 2 or 3 different ways, right? Could do it as a software engineer. I could do it as an educator. Or I can do it as a particular discipline that I did in software engineering, right? But the way I even got to wanting to be in STEM, first I had a love for education, a love for math, love for engineering. So I liked playing with Legos already. Who knew? And then I have grandkids that more than love playing with Legos because of the things that I've done. But I started doing that because when I was working at IBM, I volunteered in middle school. Middle school 7th grade girls is who I would volunteer with. And we would run a camp in the summer, and then during the school year, I communicated with them using, have you ever heard of tryscience.org? It's a little website that's a lot like code.org or whatever, some of those other coding websites that they have out there, and it shows all these science and math experiments you can do as well as some coding exercises, and it's created by IBM. And we would work through some of those little challenges, experiments, whoever I was mentoring, and sometimes we'd get together as well and do them in person. But because I had done that, that also led me to doing what I do as a volunteer now, working in the schools, and I've been a substitute teacher, and I've done all these other little jobs that are really more match my first love of education and my second of technology and math, right? So it also helps you figure out, what is it I want to do? I mean, education's a very different sector than the corporate world of IBM and Dell and all these other companies, right? So there's some of that as well. Another idea is that might help your resume stand out is if you have any unique specialties that a target that employers would pay a premium price for. Like one I know of is if you know a second language, especially Spanish in the state of Texas. That will get you to the front of any line at a job fair. Because especially if you're in the world of education, I know the teachers go right to the front of the line and they'll pay an extra amount of money. Or if you'll go work in a school district that has a different demographic than the middle of Round Rock, you'll get paid an extra premium to go do that. And then I have examples in the corporate technology world. I have some friends who are Chinese. The husband and wife were born in China, but they went to college here in Canada and the United States. And the husband got a job working for companies like Samsung because he was Chinese and because he had a big list of technology companies and technologies he had worked on. I mean, he has all the right credentials, but he's also Chinese. And not only that, they sent him over to China to open sites for Samsung because of that. His wife, who speaks Mandarin, got a job with Bazaar Voice, just reviewing postings that were in Chinese. So that was another way that she could use that initial, that difference in her resume to get a more unique kind of job at a place like Bazaar Voice. So those are some examples of, culture and language that can help make a difference as well. But I know there's others. That's just my example. And then, yes.
I just noticed something as you were giving your examples. All your unique examples seem to tie into what you could bring to a job search. I'll give you an example. I play in a Chinese and Asian basketball league.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only non-Asian they've ever allowed to play with them. Everybody else is Asian, I'm only non-Asian.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting fact. But now, how would I bring that into a job discussion? Because I don't speak Chinese. I've never worked with Chinese companies. I don't have any tie to China. I just play basketball.
Can you read it?
They're all talking in their language and
Yeah.
but you don't understand what they're saying.
No, when they talk with each other, I have no clue what they're saying. I look at their body language, I can tell who's winning the conversation and who's not.
Yeah.
But I don't know what they're saying.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, interesting fact, yes. But is it something I could play off of in an interview? Probably not, because I don't speak it, I don't write it, I don't have connections, other than,
Mm-hmm.
well, I can tell the interesting story of how I got to be involved with them, but it has nothing to do with, my,
Although they may like you to be there so they can practice their English with a native English speaker. That might be part of it, or your skill in the whatever it is you guys are doing. Right. Right.
but what I'm saying is, interesting fact,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily something you would want to put on a resume because I couldn't tie it. I don't know what the tie is. If you're interviewing someone.
Very approachable,
Mm-hmm.
even to people
Yeah.
unconnected to our culture.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go. We're not tired of it.
Yeah.
But is that an example of something that's good to have on a resume, or is that just something?
It could.
I mean, if
Well, but it also might catch somebody's attention, like an Asian manager says, "Oh," it just catches their eye, so they end up reading your resume. Could even just be that simple. Because I have similar examples in mind. Like, I worked all the time with the translators in other countries. I was often put in charge of getting our product translated, by a dozen different countries, including Asian. Plus, Japan is really big. Japan, IBM, is real big on developing software for people with disabilities. And that's who I mainly worked with. So I know a lot about the Japanese culture, and they didn't like me being their manager because I'm a woman. Yeah. So you learn a lot about culture, even if you don't know the language. Because I learned a lot about culture just working in those kind of jobs. And I would put those definitely on my resume. What's the lead?
It is a Chinese school here in Austin. So the Chinese faction here in Austin rents out this school on Sundays. And their wives and children. Really? Really?
You could just list it.
What's on my resume? It says, sole non-Asian player in an Asian basketball league.
Mm-hmm.
What's on my resume?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't know if that was helpful.
Hobbies and interests can, especially if you're trying to get a job with an international company that works with other. That would catch their attention. Yeah. Okay. So if you turn to the next page, the top of the next page, 2B, skills, attributes, and qualifiers. So we're going to talk a lot about keywords. So when you're trying to answer these brainstorming questions and develop what are going to become car statements in your resume, you want to use words that are descriptive and that are strong. Strong nouns and keywords like I might, for example, use the word, I know programming languages, but I might put in parentheses the actual ones that I know, which are all high level, right? So I know C++ and Java and some of those, and BASIC. I know Visual Basic. Who needs that? Or Fortran, nobody needs that. But yet, have you seen the commercial lately? The COBOL commercial? Have you guys seen that? It's actually so funny because that's the only language my husband knows is COBOL because he worked for American Express. So, and I know, but if you knew that, you would put that on your resume because that stands out. But you might not list all of the languages. You're going to list the ones you think your potential employer would be interested in because you looked at the job description, right? So you would put those kind of things. Project management, technical writing. Under transferable skills, so when you talk about your transferable skills and you're going to use strong verbs, right? What you do naturally. They're not just things that you normally think of using. Like you might have said, I was this or that. I was a software engineer. I was a nurse or whatever you were. You shouldn't just say that. That's very passive, right? But you could say that I negotiated contracts or I organized project plans or scheduled them. I counseled or was a consultant in these areas, or I implemented something, or I was a mentor. And then for personal attributes, you might even list these in your top part of your resume. How many of you have discovered on our website these 6 videos about the resumes that gets results? Anybody notice those yet? So we have on our website some videos you can watch to help you get started on, or really just beef up if you've already had some done resume work. Beef up your resume, and it will talk about these attributes and how to develop the different sections of your resume. The summary section, the work experience section, the work experience, as well as on the back, you'll list some education. It'll tell you things like, don't say what year you graduated from college, If they didn't ask you, don't tell them, because it'll indicate your age, maybe. Or it may indicate that you're much younger than you are because you just took your second degree or whatever. But it'll give you little tips and hints on how to make your resume get noticed. That's the main thing you're trying to do, is get in the door for the interview with your resume, right? So you have to kind of go along and follow these. But personal attributes come from both two sources mainly. Your job descriptions that you're looking at, pull out keywords. Have you ever used Job Scan, anybody? Some of you have used that. So a lot of recruiters or HR, they're actually comparing your resume to their job description and seeing how many matches you get. And they often will start pulling out resumes just based on the highest matches. So you want to make sure any keywords on the job description that are true about you, don't put things on there that aren't, but if they're true about you, put those in your resume in place of a close synonym or something, or as part of, your description of your achievements. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Reword it. Technical, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 That's what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And that's what you should do, because everybody else is, or a lot of people are. Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm.
But I'm wondering, what sort of results, are you getting more interviews? No. You're not?
Phrases. Because it's harder to match a phrase. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, some other ways to get personal attributes too is if you take a career direction kind of class or an assessment, like a personality assessment in your ESFJ or whatever you are, there's descriptive, huh? I hope not. um, but anyway, you're looking for there's keywords that describe that kind of result for your assessment, so you can use those as well. But yeah, the job scan search is the one that you're really trying to optimize as best you can. Um,
I'm struggling with this, I'm sorry, I don't mean to derail us, but I'm struggling with this too, do you just put a keyword section in your resume? It says, no, seriously, it says, here are you're looking for these skills, attributes, I've got them, I'm just gonna list them out.
well, the attributes are just a list.
Hide them, or like, put them in white so people don't know they're on your resume, but they're
Yeah.
there to get past the ATS system. Because it's ATS system.
Yeah, actually, in our little template, they have about a half a dozen to 10, 6 to 10 in your summary section. You are just listing attributes there. But you also want to include them in your car statements too, yeah. So wherever you can, include them, yeah. And then there's also qualifiers, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Old resume. This job description. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and a lot of people too have a bigger base resume, if you will, than 2 pages because you maybe had more than one kind of job you did over the years. You know, like I did technical writing, I did testing, I was a technical lead, I did project management. So I could list all those different things, but if I'm applying for a project manager, it's not going to care so much if I know C++ or not, probably. So,
How successful has that strategy been for you in getting you to the next level or callback or interview? Have you felt not okay? And then what we're all trying to find is how do we just get to that interview stage? This is because, doing what you're doing, Stephen, it says, I've tried that, no results. Sounds like a great idea what you're doing, but if it's not getting us to that next stage, what's the secret sauce?
Well, and again, like I said, don't judge my performance.
uh-huh.
Because like I said, I was taking a resume, okay, now let me iterate on it. Let me try and build
Right.
the score up. And then when I resubmitted it, they're like, you've already submitted one.
Yeah, that's a harder thing to get around.
So don't judge my,
So
acknowledge me, but
yeah, some other ways to potentially get around things like that is, first of all, I want to make sure y'all aren't submitting like 100 or 20, even 20 or 30 resumes to different job descriptions. You're talking about customizing your resume pretty much for every one you submit, right? Okay, because that's the first thing. Yeah, if we're just submitting them and we're not getting any results and we haven't really customized to one particular job description, then that's not going to work too well. But the other thing is, I wanted to say, I know at IBM, when people would submit a resume, even people I knew were perfect for the job because they used to work for me, and they took a leave of absence to have children or whatever, and they were coming back. I going, how did it not get through? Well, it was because they had 2 years experience in a certain programming language and not 3, or some little thing I needed to tweak as a manager, but I didn't know what it was without calling HR. And so the other thing is that I could see, or she could, the people applying from outside the company could not see who the hiring manager was. So the other thing is, if you're applying to a company where you know anybody at all that works there, see if they'll have a conversation with you to give you some insight on, do you know who the hiring manager for this position is? Because then you can use another tool called networking to help you get your resume directly to a hiring manager and pass that HR hump that seems impossible to get past if you don't know somebody, right? Do you have a comment? Right. 70%. 70. Yeah, networking is a huge tool that is often overlooked. Even if, like, I'll give you another example. When I go and volunteer all over the city for a lot of different reasons. And one time I was in East Austin and we were having a back to school party for the kids. And somebody was there that wasn't from our organization. And I go, oh, do you come to these often, these back to school programs? And he goes, oh yeah, and not only that, he had a kit of Legos with him, right? And I go, what company are you with? And he goes, National Instruments. Did y'all know? At National Instruments, they created an interface, Mindstorm's interface, between Legos and their software. And so it's something they were interested in. If you can find something in the company you're applying for that matches your interest, it might even be a philanthropy kind of thing. Like IBM's big on giving to education and the arts, right? And that's partly why they had encouraged me to even volunteer in education. They wanted all the people at IBM to be volunteering in education somewhere. Yeah, they do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've had,
of the
yeah.
right people. I mean, like, this would be a great, like, if you could, once a month, have, like,
Well, and that's why they do, okay, they do certain things here at Job Seekers. One is every Christmas and other times throughout the year, they'll invite you to come volunteer with them over at the food bank, which you think, oh, there's not very many people there. There's hundreds of people there. And a lot of them work for companies, big companies. They're like the CEO or the vice president of a bank, but they also have job fairs. Like we've had them at the Domain before. I don't know when the last one was or when the next one will be, but Craig Foster does. What is it? Oh, it's tomorrow. Oh, okay. Yeah. So there's some job fairs we partner with. Yeah. It's only for Purpose Works? Oh, yeah, it's always on the calendar. You can always look at our calendar. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a LinkedIn meetup, not a job seekers meetup. It's just a regular LinkedIn.
It's a meetup,
Lots
not
of
a
people there to
job
come and
fair.
just network and feel
but
good.
are there hiring people there? Or is it just like a bunch of us who are looking for jobs?
To some recruiters. Yeah. Okay. That's a meetup, not a job fair. But yeah, we have had job fairs. Yeah, we do. We have recruiters. Oftentimes, yeah, Craig is here. He oftentimes will have job postings that he personally has gotten from people who are hiring. And he'll tell you, and he'll help connect you if you need that as well. Um, right. Okay, I need to talk about car statements because that's your next exercise, which is supposed to be starting. So let's move a little bit on to car statements more specifically. So, how many of you, I know that you're already going to say yes, but at the beginning of the year with your previous employers, you've set up some objectives for the year, things that you want to be able to accomplish. And then throughout the year, you kind of measure what you're doing and maybe even update your objectives based on what they were at the beginning of the year. And then at the end of the year, you have an assessment against those objectives, like a performance plan and then an assessment, right? So if you have any of those as resources, these are going to really help you as we go into this next exercise of car statements. You're shaking your head no. They're not going to help you? Oh, okay. Well, they helped me because especially if because you can't always remember, what I did 5 or 10 years ago, which they encourage you in the resume videos to only go back about 15 years if you have a much longer history than that. But yeah, if you have some of those performance plans and assessments against those, they can help you remember, oh yeah, I achieved these kind of objectives, and has some of the numbers maybe that you couldn't remember on how many clients you had or what percentage improvement productivity wise or those kind of things. And actually, it's not just us saying these kind of things, but I used to get more job magazines when I was working. My husband canceled a lot, but in the Money magazine, they would every single month have an article about searching for a job. And oftentimes they would tell you what the important numbers for your resume were. And so I still have a copy of one of the pages that talk about things like, talk about finances or locations or time or the size of something or the percentage. And if you want to look at that at the end, you're welcome to come up. And I have a couple different articles that I have on that. Why numbers are important in your resume. But let's go on to the car statements and look at the page where it has the memory probe questions 2D2 for car statements. So to help you come up with these, you're going to be looking back through the work experience that you've put on your resume, the positions that you had, that you want to bring out for this particular job posting that you're going to apply for. And you want like 3 or 4 bulleted items under each position. In the past, back when I wrote a resume, all you needed was the position. You didn't have to talk about all your successes and achievements so much as the positions and the skills that you had. But that's what helps your resume stand out, are these car statements. And so you might hear some of the questions that we have, like, did you bring in new clients? Did you increase sales or market share or decrease cost, save money, time, resources, complete a major project under budget or on time, which you may not remember the numbers for that, but if you said you did it under budget or on time, I know when I had projects, I had to estimate every single little task almost to figure out how long is it going to take my team to accomplish the goals of this project. How many people am I going to have to hire as a contractor or a real employee to accomplish this? Those kind of things. So, and if we brought it in under budget and on time, it's usually because I dropped a functionality or two, because that was more important to them, that it was on budget and under time, under the time I had stated, or on time. Did you receive an award or special recognition like Salesman of the Year, an Excellence Award? Even Employee of the Month could matter. Depends on what your job is that you're applying for. And like I had said before, do you have any patents outstanding? Do you have any articles you've written or conferences that you were a speaker at? Or are you known as an expert in your field? And what kind of credentials do you have to show that kind of thing? So those are some questions. And then like I had talked about before, if you turn the page, we list a lot of action verbs, of which you can get a whole lot more just by using, tell me synonyms in Microsoft Word for this word. But you'll start every single car statement with a strong action verb. Like, I achieved something, I consulted, I championed. Or in a process, you might have simplified, streamlined the process. Or you published something or produced it, negotiated contracts or negotiated deals or negotiated with another company. And then we have worksheets. And I think in the next section, they're going to give you a worksheet to use today to see if you can try to come up with some car statements that might apply to your particular resume. And there's some samples here at the bottom. If you look at them, the first 2 do have some numbers. But then the third one is really addressing more, you're the recipient of some kind of an award. But even if you say that, then add a phrase that says, by what did you do to get that award? By creating and implementing a new customer follow-up communication center or whatever it was. Or like the last bulleted under samples is really an HR one. You maximize employee retention by ensuring high employee morale by initiating and implementing new bonus incentive plan. Yes?
These to me look like result statements, but where's the C part? Where's the challenge?
Right. The C.
Employee retention by ensuring high employee morale, by initiating and implementing new bonus incentives plans.
Right.
What was the result? What you did? What was the challenge?
The challenge does not often need to be stated. Okay, that's what helped you think of these results and actions. But the challenge was more about figuring, remembering what was the success and achievement I achieved. What did I achieve? And why did I achieve it? You can state the challenge, but you don't usually have to, because you don't want to waste any extra white space that you don't have to if it's not going to get you anywhere, right? So in general, we found, and we're not the only ones, other people teach car statements did not get created here at Job Seekers Network. It's by job clubs and job organizations and recruiters all over the country have been talking about these. They may have a different acronym or a different name for it, but it's basically the same. What benefit do you offer to an employer? Yes. Right. Yeah, a lot of them are. Yeah. A lot of them are, if you get in an interview and they ask you about a situation, the situational questions, those often will lead you to a car statement. And those are the kind of things you want to bring into your resume, the things that clinch your interview as well. Yeah. And in the resumes that gets result videos, we talk about bringing up potentially your three top car statements to put right under the summary of your resume section. Because a lot of times, I mean, this is probably not as true as it used to be. We used to have paper resumes that we're just flipping through, and we would only look at the first half of the first page. And if it didn't catch our attention, we moved it to the side because we're trying to get down to 3 for the day, right? We're going to interview 3 people tomorrow or whatever. And so I got a stack of 50 resumes to go through. I'm going to just go really fast. And whatever gets my attention first, then I'll weed those down too. But we would look at the first half. So that's why you might want to bring up those top car statements. And if you do, you also have to add a little tail to them that says, when I was, a project manager in 1984 or whatever it was. So they know where it really came from. I wouldn't go that far back. Sorry. Sorry, 2000 maybe, okay? Even that's old. Okay, so if you look at the next page, page 5, it's going to talk about how you put this all together. And essentially what you're going to do is you're going to get your top 3 selling assets that you did in the first brainstorming session, and then what are your top 3 car statements, and you're going to summarize those. Essentially what you're going to do is pull out the keywords from all those statements, right, to help see what is a theme, what are you trying to talk about in your personal brand statement, to summarize the best of what I did, right, what benefit I have to offer. And that's what you're going to put together as your personal brand statement. And on the top of page 6, we have some samples of what those statements might be. And I'm going to have you look at just the 4th one. The 4th one is actually a personal brand statement that I wrote based on, if I were a typical software engineer at IBM back in the early 2000s, where their commercial was solutions for a smarter planet, this is what I probably would have said about me. I have a unique background in designing and developing leading-edge technologies to address third-world economic problems and quality of life in emerging markets. But because I actually specialized in accessibility, I would change that statement to say, I have a unique background in designing and developing leading-edge accessibility technologies and standards to address the employability and quality of life for people with disabilities. That would have been more my statement, right? And actually, I did when I retired from IBM and started volunteering here at Job Seekers 13 years ago. I took a class they offer still today called Living the Called Life. And I developed a mission statement that is very much like a personal brand statement. And so today, my statement is, or has been for quite a while, as a community impact volunteer and instructor, I mentor, coach, and educate others, especially the next generation, regarding career and life objectives, financial management, reading and technology literacy, and faith in God. So I incorporate things I've done in a volunteer sense as well as a working sense since I retired from IBM. But I could still become an accessibility consultant again if I wanted and would use more of the other personal brand statement. Yes?
Generic result statement. I'm looking at the 4th bullet. It says capture 30% of a competitor's market share. Now,
Mm-hmm.
using you as an example, if I may.
Right.
Coming from IBM, if you put down your resume, capture 30% of a competitor's market share. How do you prove that? I mean, that sounds very, wow. Capture 30% of competitor's market share at IBM. I mean, how would you even go?
Well, it's possible.
So making these
Yeah.
video statements,
Yeah.
how accurate, provable,
Yeah.
or you're trying to
It, yeah. Yeah, if you were getting paid based on, a percent. But you could also, it's potentially possible to use things like the, what do you call it? where they write each year, it's like the annual report from IBM. Actually, to be honest, they featured us every year in the annual report. They didn't always have all the numbers listed in the same, like they didn't really bring out Speech Viewer, but they often would talk about how we helped people with the blind use the web, the World Wide Web. And we did have products for that. And so some of ours were in the annual report. But yeah. And then, like I said, if you have your performance plans or whatever, they might have it in there too. And I also, I know I'm a little bit strange, but I kept every newspaper article that was written about each product I developed before I even went to work in the Accessibility Center. So I could show, here was when I, worked on the 5280, which was, some printer, computer kind of software or whatever, peer-to-peer kind of thing that we did. So
So what do we agree to stay away from statements like that
if you can't back them up.
can we just,
Well, then you could say more than or less than or up to, I don't know. You can use words that say this is not an exact number, but this is in a general ballpark if you can't substantiate it. You don't want to get too overzealous in selling yourself. Yeah. So you want to say at least what you could prove to be true. So I know I kind of rushed through the very end of it because I think they do want to, even though I don't see anybody. Oh, there he is. Yeah, you're going to work on car statements. So hopefully you guys got something out of this.